So I have a really simple point to make in this video. It's simple, but it's deep, and it turns out it's more difficult for me to express without offending or alienating the people in my life. I'm concerned about how this video is going to be viewed by people in my life right now. Keeping it all the way real with you. The really simple point I want to make in this video, and not for the first time, is that these guys who are into this nofap ideology, these guys who are into a lot of these kind of anti-woman, vaguely misogynistic ideologies like MGTOW, men going their own way and this shit, I really think they haven't even considered. I think they haven't given enough thought to the possibility that a woman can play a positive role in their lives, that a woman doesn't necessarily subtract from your ambition, that a woman doesn't reduce your ability to pursue the goals that really matter in your life, that she can add to that. She can add to that ambition. And this even comes down to a little bit of a kind of biological misconception. I mean, the nofap movement, they really regard women as vampires because they think women rob them of their mental energy, that women rob them of their imagination, and they rob them of their ambition like on a chemical level, which is complete nonsense. And it's, apart from wanting to say, look, women can give you more ambition and more drive and more energy mentally and otherwise, the idea that this relationship can play a really positive role in you pursuing your goals, a lot of these guys seem to have just never thought that through. And of course, I'm the last person to come on here and give you a candy-coated version of reality. In some ways, my first marriage that has ended in divorce was the perfect marriage. In so many ways, I can say wonderful things about it. I can say terrible things about it too. But when I was younger, I was really looking for a woman who would understand me. Why? Because unlike a lot of these guys who talk about being self-reliant and independent as an abstract virtue, I actually was self-reliant and independent. I was doing independent research. I was teaching myself languages. Teaching yourself a language with no teacher and no classroom, it's incredibly hard work. I was undertaking original research and even doing very independent things in terms of my career and earning money. And you know what that independence gets you? It gets you alone. There's a difference between being lonely and being alone. I was alone. And, when I was younger, it really meant a lot to me to have a woman in my life who would sit down at the breakfast table and be able to understand what motivated me in life, understand the project I was undertaking, understand the direction I was going in life, who could sit down with me at the breakfast table, and even if she's not involved, even if she's not part of the project, who could really contribute positively to my aspirations and goals. And you know what? I've outgrown it. I don't even care about any of that stuff anymore. That's the bizarre thing. I feel like I've got to come on here and maybe give younger guys advice that was based on who I was when I was a younger man. But I don't care about any of that stuff anymore. The marriage I had, my first marriage, I'd say in some ways really meaningfully was the perfect marriage. I got married to a woman with a PhD in cultural anthropology, a woman who really deeply understood not just the research I was doing on paper, like research involving books and libraries and archives and history and politics and publications, but a woman who understood the importance of the work I did in terms of field work, in terms of going out in the field and talking to people face to face and making things happen in the real world, who understood what I had going on in terms of charity work and everything else, and who played this wonderful supportive role in my life. And in so many ways, I feel like I've got to come on here on camera and say to these guys who are into nofap, you can have this too. You can find a woman who doesn't subtract from your ambitions, but adds to them. And on a physical, biological level, you can have a sex life that doesn't leave you feeling exhausted and demoralized, that leaves you feeling more energized and more motivated and more inspired with more imagination. You can have that. But the ambivalence I have is that the truth is, now at age 38, I don't need any of that stuff. And again, I don't want to glorify that either. It's, for me, I reached a point in terms of my own maturity. I've been so isolated for so long. And, some of my earlier girlfriends, they really did not understand who I was. Everyone's had that. Unless you've never had a girlfriend, never had a boyfriend, you know what it's like to be in a relationship where no matter how well you explain yourself, this person is never going to get you. Or for whatever reason. And it's not even because they don't love you. I've been in relationships where the girl loves me so much She has so much love for me, but her love blinds her to who I really am. And no matter how clearly I explain, no matter how much I explain who I am, she's in love with an image of me she has in her own head. She loves me to bits, really loves me, but she's never going to understand me. She's never going to know who I am. So, definitely when I was younger, there was wanting to be understood, and there was wanting to have a woman who plays that supportive role in my pursuit of my own ambitions. But now at age 38, I don't give a damn about any of that stuff. I don't need a woman to understand me, and I'm now at a point where I can be completely comfortable being in a relationship with a woman who has none of that stuff in common with me, who can't relate to and can't understand my background, my professional background, my research background, my aspirations in that respect. Damn. So look, this is really what I think is the challenge for these younger guys, and maybe it's still a challenge for some older guys too. One, you have to know what your ambitions are. Of course, it goes without saying, don't start from this misconception that the woman is only going to be an obstacle to your ambitions, that the woman is only going to be a distraction from your ambitions, that the woman is going to subtract from your ambitions. The woman can play a positive role in your life in adding to, your ambitions and assisting you in your pursuit of ambitions. And by the same token, you as the man, you have to play the same positive role in her life. And you have to work at it. Somebody was just saying in my stream, they said, oh, well, why can't you just be in a relationship and just be yourself? Fuck that, okay? What if your next girlfriend, what if your next wife wants to be a surgeon and is going through medical school? You've got to take it, you as the man, you got to change your life to play a supportive role for her doing that, okay? It goes both ways. And you're not going to do that by just being yourself. What if, the next woman I'm involved with is literally a farmer? She's involved in agronomy. She's studying, the science and practical work of how to perform. You think I'm not going to change? You think I'm going to just be myself? Fuck that. Don't just be yourself. Change who you are and work hard at it. Hit the books, hit the gym, hit the farm, whatever. Hit whatever you got to hit for you as a man to change so you are consciously changing your life so you play a supportive role for her and the pursuit of her ambitions. And for you, step one is you got to know what your ambitions are. You've got to be honest with yourself about what your ambitions are. And then you have to learn to communicate to her what the positive role is she can play in helping you in the support of, in the pursuit of your ambitions. And that's hard to do for most men. Most men are terrible at communicating that. Most men are terrible about being honest with themselves about what their ambitions are. And the problem is, if you're talking about a long-term relationship, your ambitions are going to change. Okay? There was a time when I was in Southeast Asia pursuing a combination of humanitarian work, politics, history. Like I was doing research on the history of slavery. And, Buddhism was a huge part of my life. There's no way to, Buddhism was connected to all those things. My research into the history of Buddhism was linked to the history of slavery, communism and the war and post-war reconstruction, all this meaningful stuff going on in my life. And you know what? That ended. Then there was a point in my life where that was over and that was in the past tense. And I took on a totally new direction in my research and my passions. And I was expecting the same woman to stay with me. And I was expecting the same woman who played a supportive role in my life when we were living in Cambodia together to play a totally different role supporting me in my ambitions when we moved to Canada together. Okay? So being honest with yourself about what your ambitions are and what the role is what role you want her to play. That's very, very hard to communicate, and it's going to happen both ways. And it's going to mean work. It's not going to mean just being yourself. It's not going to mean just being loving or loving the other person. All right? It's going to be work for her, and it's going to be work for you too. And I guess, my point is now that I'm so old, now that I'm 38, maybe if you don't need her to play any supportive role at all, maybe if you're that guy, maybe that's also what you got to communicate. The example I used in my first video on this that was really spontaneous and almost joking is actually a really good example to come back to, though. If you are a guy who is into repairing automobiles, what you like to do is go in your garage and take a broken down car and fix it up. it's very unlikely that you will have a girlfriend who is literally in the garage with you, holding a wrench, hands-on, helping you with that task, right? Maybe you do. Some guys have a girlfriend and they're involved to that extent. Some guys, even if their girlfriend could be in the garage, they don't want them to be. They don't want them to play that role. But what is the role you want her to play? Maybe if you're really being honest with yourself and you can really communicate it to her, maybe the role you want her to play is that when she sits down at the breakfast table, she's talking to you about what's going on in your projects. She's asking you about what's going on in the garage. She's talking through with you your plans and your ambitions in a way that you find positive and supportive and meaningful and wonderful. And that, again, inspires you to do more, makes you more energized. This is not a vampire pulling something away from you. Maybe it just is those positive, understanding conversations at the breakfast table. And there are guys watching this who are going to hear that and say, no, you're dead wrong. There are guys hearing this who will look back on every relationship they've ever had and say, no, I dread that. There are guys who are going to watch this and say they wake up every morning and what they fear most is having to sit down at the breakfast table and listen to the inane bullshit that their wife or their girlfriend brings, and they don't want to sit down and listen to a bunch of questions from somebody who doesn't understand them and doesn't support them, and where that whole breakfast table conversation is only something that subtracts from their ambitions in life, and it's an unwanted source of misery that they have to deal with. Guess what? If that's your situation, that's the wrong girl for you, and you're probably the wrong man for her. Maybe the problem is just communication. Maybe the problem is that you haven't communicated to her what your ambitions are. Maybe you haven't communicated to her what the positive role she can play in you pursuing your ambitions really is. Maybe. Or maybe your ambitions have changed since you first got together. Like me, I switched from Cambodia to Canada. Maybe when you first got together, you had a totally different set of goals than you have now in the situation. You have to reflect that. Maybe. But maybe this is someone, maybe the particular woman you're with, you got to leave her. And instead of viewing women this way, as always playing a subtractive role in your pursuit of your ambition, subtracting from your ambition or your pursuit of ambition, maybe you need to flip this upside down and just use it as a criterion where you promise yourself you're not going to fall in love with a woman. You're not going to get into a relationship with a woman unless she can play that positive role, unless she can play that supportive role. And not everybody can. And in so many cases, of course, you just got to break up and move on, no matter how painful that may be, either because she can't play that role, maybe you can't communicate that role, or maybe you haven't been honest with yourself about what your ambitions really are and how the other person in the relationship is going to fit into those ambitions.